Welcome back to your weekly dose of Monday morning inspiration to help you take back control of your health and transform your mind, body, and gut. I'm your host, Ellie Breacher, and today on the Gut 360 podcast, we're talking all about how to get rid of bloating and simple ways to support your gut so you can get back to living your healthiest, happiest life. So grab a matcha and let's get into it. Today, I'm speaking to Annie Openshaw, an online fitness and health coach, and also a wonderful friend of mine. Annie is passionate about gut health and strength training after years of doing what she thought were the right things, but still feeling bloated, inflamed, and disconnected from her body. Annie shifted away from restriction and extremes and focused on proper fueling, strength training, and lifestyle balance. She now helps women build confidence, improve their gut health, and feel strong and energized without food guilt or burnout. Welcome, Annie, to the Gut 360 podcast.
Thank you so much for having me. I feel like we've been meaning to do this for ages and I'm really excited to be here.
I'm so happy to have you on. And the first question I want to ask you is, where does your passion for gut health really stem from?
Okay, so I have suffered with gut issues from the age of 15, I think it was. So it goes back a long way for me at a time where I feel like a lot of gut issues in women don't seem to start so early. So it's something that's really been in my life all through my teenage years. So I guess it comes from struggling at such a young age. And then, of course, coming through all the issues that I've come through, later in life to get to where I am now.
Yeah, it's amazing when what you do for work actually comes through your own journey, your own struggles. I can definitely relate to struggling with gut health issues from my childhood, really from the age of 8 as well. And so at that time, when this all started, what were the signs that your body was giving you that something wasn't quite right? Maybe was there like a tipping point that made you realize you had to take action?
Yeah, totally. So I suffered mainly with bloating. So I didn't actually have crazy bowel issues as a lot of people experience, especially quite a few people in my family. I have a few celiacs in my family. So gut issues and things are always, it's always something that we've spoken about a lot in my family. I used to get such severe bloating, like a really, just extended stomach. It was all the time. And me and my friends used to laugh about it. But that would be my first sign. Had it all through university. But at that time, I was going through a really restrictive phase where I'd been told by some doctors to do food intolerance tests and cut all these things out. So I was, cutting out things like gluten, dairy, yeast, even things like carrots, potatoes. There were so many things that had flagged up on this food intolerance test for me. And by the point of being at university, I was eating in such a restrictive way that then eating something with like gluten in or dairy in was actually making me physically sick because my body was so not used to it. So yeah, I've come a long way since then.
You really have. And look at you now. I mean, going back to that time when bloating was kind of your normal, what were you typically eating day to day? And also, what did the rest of your health look like, including your training?
So it's tricky because at a young age, I don't think I had any other health issues that were obvious to me that came alongside it. But at the point where just before I decided to really make changes, there were so many things that I was experiencing. Also, like not really knowing where symptoms maybe of poor gut health, like poor skin, really bad energy. I was the first person to pick up a cold. I was constantly riddled with colds. What other things? Oh, like hair breakage, nails, really pretty healthy diet. I would probably say my friends would have said I was one of the healthier people in my friendship group. And, I ate vegetables, I ate fruit. I've never been a fussy eater. But my diet was full of what we now call ultra processed foods without me realizing. So lots of the things that I was having on the daily, and I think maybe these don't affect some people, but as someone who, had gut issues, these were affecting me, were things like, Warburton's wholemeal bread, which I thought was a healthy food. But if you look at the ingredients, it's full of things that we wouldn't typically keep in our kitchen. And I was also having things like bagels and lots of pre-made sauces. Not necessarily that these things are always things that we have to stay clear of, but the ones that we're having are maybe not the best quality things. I was also, though, having some obvious things that I think the fitness culture, the fitness industry sort of promotes, like sugar-free energy drinks and things. And that because I was in the fitness industry, I was thinking, oh, these are kind of fine to be having. They don't have calories in. So even though I was having fruit and veg, I was also having lots of things like that and really, really lacking variety in my diet, which I have changed in a huge way. So I was having just really simple veg on repeat and like broccoli, green beans. I was eating like bananas and some berries. I'd have like onions, peppers, and that's really about it. And just the same things on repeat. So we've made a lot of changes since then.
Amazing. Yeah. I mean, I think a lot of people are going to be able to relate to that phase. I know I certainly do, where I thought I was eating so healthily, especially back in my earlier years at university, but I was really loading up on protein bars, all these ultra processed foods, protein shakes, protein this, protein that.
Mm-hmm.
Do you remember the Quest bar phase? They were all over Instagram and people would put them in the microwave and then drizzle peanut butter on them.
I also fell into the grenade bar trap massively. I was really obsessed with those through lockdown. I'm now really ashamed of it. My grenade bar and White Monster on repeat habit was just terrible.
Oh, those monster drinks.
I know. I was genuinely addicted to White Monster. I would say this now, which my friends find so funny. But yeah, I'd have like 2 a day sometimes.
Not good.
No, not good.
And so how did your approach to food change? How would you say, when you kind of moved away from that restriction or less processed foods, what's changed?
So I think about it. I try and look back on my journey now and try and figure out exactly how I did it. But the first thing that I did was reducing the ultra processed foods in my diet. So taking out the protein bars, sugar-free drinks, but also switching those products I mentioned before, like Warburton's wholemeal bread was like that CD loaf with the purple branding. So many people buy into that bread. Switching things like that for alternatives that were slightly healthier. So it wasn't necessarily about cutting out carbs or things. It's about switching for a higher quality one. And I noticed quite a big difference just by doing that. Also things like, rather than drenching my food in teriyaki sauce from a packet, maybe mixing together soy sauce and honey and a few more like homemade things. So I started off by doing that. I then went to add in more what a lot of people call like probiotic rich foods, but basically those like live fermented foods. So for me, that looked like a high quality Greek yogurt, kefir, like kimchi, sauerkraut, what else, like raw miso, for example, lots more of those. And I now have about like 2 portions a day in my diet. And then varying all the plants I was eating. So as you probably said on your podcast, lots of times, like when we think of plants, a lot of people just think like fruit and veg, but we're talking like herbs, seeds, nuts, legumes, grains, like all those sorts of things. And the way that I did that was just challenge myself to add another thing into my shopping basket a week and just try different things. So if we were to buy salad, typically we would have just bought like an iceberg lettuce. No problem with that on paper, but it's not, not that it's the most nutrient-y, like dense vegetable, but just swapping that out for things like those dark leafy greens, like kale, chicory with purple leaves, mixed things, just, really trying to step out of our comfort zone, adding in a different fruit to our shop that we maybe wouldn't typically buy. So those were the 3 steps I took in that order. They've paid off big time for me.
I love that. That's so important. And I completely agree. Every time you go to the supermarket, just pick up something new. And it doesn't need to be a crazy exotic thing you've never seen before. But it also can be, if you usually buy red peppers, buy yellow peppers or orange peppers or green peppers. If you usually cook with a white onion, get a red onion. It's got lots more antioxidants and polyphenols in it. Or like you said, swapping your lettuce or your salad base. So I love those really easy, actionable tips. I feel like
also
so
quite
good.
fun. It's quite a fun exercise that we say, oh God, we've not bought that for a while. Let's get that. Or like things like purple sprouting broccoli, stuff that sits next to the item you usually pick up, but you probably wouldn't think of.
And it should be fun. Food gets to be fun. and nourishing ourselves gets to be fun as well. I feel like you're great with diversity. I always love watching your meal prep videos on Instagram. You're actually the queen of meal prep, I would say. And I know you talk a lot, you talk a lot about prioritizing your future self as well. So can you share maybe some time-saving hacks with us on the train of thought of meal prep or anything else along those lines?
Yeah, of course. So one of the reasons I got into meal prep was because looking at plant diversity, I became quite obsessed with this idea of having lots of colour on my plate, which we know is really beneficial. But I was thinking, how can I do this really easily? Because to put together what I like to call like a nourish bowl, sort of like a really hearty salad bowl, can be warm, doesn't need to be lettuce, cucumber sort of thing. And it can take time if you're doing it, every day from scratch. I work often from an office space. I have to take food in with me. And I was thinking, how can I make this every day? But it not take me like 40 minutes to put together, because who realistically has that time for lunch? So I started prepping the things on that plate, which typically would take the longest to make. So for me, that would usually be my carbohydrate source. I love to do like sweet potato or roasted butternut squash. No one's got time to roast sweet potato at lunchtime. I think that having that prepped in advance takes about half an hour to do is really key. And then your protein sources as well. So I would have a Tupperware of my carbs for the week, a Tupperware of the protein. And then I would also do a dressing. And now to me, a dressing is so key. And I know you love a dressing as well.
Yeah.
Because it can make the most boring bowl of food taste absolutely amazing. And I also love that it's such a quick, easy way to pack in like extra diversity. I sometimes put kefir into my dressing and stuff. It can have raw miso in, which is one of my favorite like dressing bases. So it can have loads of like really good, a lot of goodness just in the dressing alone. But that again, mixing up a dressing at lunchtime, sometimes a bit of a barrier of entry to some people. So I would have those three things prepped, and sometimes some things like roasted peppers or some steamed greens, if they're things like broccoli and stuff. And then on the day of eating or the night before, I can add in lots of different bits from my fridge. So whether that's some sliced beetroot from a jar, or like a sprinkle of seeds, or my fresh greens, or kimchi or sauerkraut, whatever. But having those things prepped literally just makes lunch so easy. And you can do it for dinner as well. But I also love a meal prep breakfast, so I can just grab and go in the morning. And I really notice, and I haven't done that, so I'm an overnight oats lover.
Tell us what goes in. I want to know everything.
Okay, so my overnight oats recipe, I think, is like the perfect combination of protein, healthy fats, and those like probiotic rich foods we were talking about before. So I do some Greek yogurt, but I also do some kefir, which is like, I don't know, kind of like the super yogurt, I guess. And I put flaxseed in, I put chia seeds in, I put oats in. We've got some nut butter in there. I like to vary nut butter. So at the moment I've got pistachio butter, which is just 100% pistachio.
What brand is that?
Incredible. It's from Vilgain. I don't know if you've heard of it, but I'll have to link it to you.
I love
it. It's quite an off-putting colour. I'm not gonna lie. But I know M&S do the ones that are like packed with like milk powders and sugars and stuff. And this is like a delicious one that's just literally 100% pistachios.
The best way.
Exactly. And then I love, if I'm feeling bougie, to make up a berry chia jam on Sunday. And sometimes at the moment in these colder months, some stewed apples or pears. And then I'll add those on the day of eating. But realistically, you can just top with fresh fruit. But I literally mix this all together in a bowl, divide it into 5+ portions, depending on how many days I'm doing it for, put it in a jar, good to go. Easiest thing, tastes incredible. Such a balanced breakfast. And I've honestly been having it for about 3 years now, and I'm still not bored of it.
I love that. This is like a bit of me, especially with the stewed apples and the stewed pears. That's delicious in the winter months. I do really similar. I always do it on a Sunday afternoon. I do it for 7 days ahead. And then if we end up going out for brunch on Saturday, then, we're a day ahead for the following week. But I make it for myself and for Zach. So I get out 14 jars every Sunday night, and I turn my kitchen into like this meal prep space. Mm-hmm. But it's such a time saver.
It's such a time saver. And as you mentioned, I always say meal prep for me is the highest form of self-care. I think there's nothing better than being able to consistently nourish yourself throughout the week and putting these steps in to just make sure you're able to do that easily. We're all super busy these days. Like, I spend my life like running around London, and I play a lot of sport. I'm at the gym, I'm trying to see friends, and I'm in meetings, I'm walking my dog. Who's got time to make every meal from scratch? And also the other thing is, we're a society that's so like stressed and overtired constantly. And I know we've really recently spoken about this, but making decisions around food when you're in that state is just so not optimal at all. So if you have your prep done, you're going for convenience food, and it's your healthy food that's in the fridge already. So it's a win-win, basically.
So true. And in the same way that I would never recommend going to the supermarket when you're starving, because you're going to come out with a box of party rings and jammy Dodgers rather than your fruits and veggies and whatever you went in there for. So I definitely agree. Meal prep is king.
We know we should be consuming fermented foods for our gut health, but have you tried kimchi or sauerkraut? This episode is sponsored by The Cultured Collective, whose kimchi and sauerkraut are naturally fermented, unpasteurized, and tested for live cultures, as well as being a source of fiber. They've won awards for their flavor, so I'm not the only one who thinks they taste amazing. It's really easy to add a scoop of these real, live foods to all kinds of meals. I love adding kimchi to the side of my eggs and topping avocado toast with sauerkraut. They're offering listeners of the Gut 360 podcast a huge 50% off their kimchi and sauerkraut, so head to the show notes to find out more. This episode is sponsored by IM8. I've recently added IM8 Daily Essentials into my morning routine, and I've noticed a real difference in my energy levels and my sleep. It's clinically proven, with 95% of people reporting more energy, 85% of people reporting better gut health, and 80% of people reporting better sleep quality. I love that it has 92 nutrient-rich ingredients, including gut-friendly probiotics and prebiotics, and I confidently recommend it to my clients. Use the code GUT360 for a special discount and free welcome code on your first order.
Since improving your gut health, has that impacted your life in other ways in terms of things like your energy, your confidence, your body image? What have been the positive knock-on effects?
There's so many. It's honestly difficult for me to list. So it's interesting. The journey when I went on was purely to get rid of my bloating, because that was the thing that I found just really tricky. Like, being in a bikini on holiday, constantly having to pack things in case I got bloated. And it happened to me pretty much every single day. And it's also probably good for me to mention that I was in quite a stressed state, which obviously has a huge knock-on impact on our gut health, which I'm sure your listeners have probably heard you talk about a lot before. And so that didn't help as well. But I made these changes to get rid of my bloating. So everything else I experienced on the back of it was a complete shock to me, which I found really, really interesting. But I now love to speak about this online, because I think if you're going through any of the other things, changing your gut health has a huge impact. So one of the things I noticed really quickly actually was mood, which we don't speak about enough. And I know there's a lot of like emerging research on the brain and the gut. And we have obviously this brain gut axis and things, but mood, just feeling so much happier. I don't know if it was also partly because I felt more confident, more in control of my eating. I was putting more positive energy, I like to say, into myself, which I think is always a great thing. But undoubtedly, fueling myself in the right way had an impact on that. Also, energy levels. One thing that was huge for me is I was someone who I would get quite dizzy throughout the day if I hadn't eaten regularly. So I was constantly needing to snack. So I brand myself previously as like a snacky person. I was like, oh, I wouldn't be able to go a few hours without a snack. I'd constantly have to be having little bits, because my meals weren't proper meals and they weren't balanced in the right way. Also, like I was saying earlier about not getting ill so much, a maximum once a year cold situation now, rather than like every couple of months. I don't pick up like stomach bugs from people in the same way either. Then also things like my skin, I went through such a huge transformation with that, and that's something that I never thought I'd be able to solve. Puffiness, huge one for me. All over my body, but I could see it before. My eyes were almost like, my eyelids were just like protruding over them. My face was so inflamed. And I just thought that was what my face looked like. And that changed in a huge way. And then on top of that, things like my hair, my nails, I'm probably missing some, but there are so many positive things I experienced off the back of it. And I just hadn't expected to experience them. So it was great.
That is incredible. And Annie, I feel like you are a walking advert for gut health. You've got this amazing hair, glowing skin, incredible abs, so energetic, so positive. I love it. That's amazing. But I also love that you touched on stress, because on the Gut 360 podcast, we always take a 360-degree approach to gut health. So in terms of stress management, what does that actually look like in real life for you?
So I don't ever know whether I fall into the same categories as other people here, but I guess it's maybe good to get someone with a little bit of a different approach to its view on this. So I don't do yoga, not because I don't absolutely love it when I do it, but I do so much other exercise, I actually would struggle to fit it in. And I don't journal, and I don't meditate. And I love all these things. And then they're things that I encourage my clients to do, but they're not actually things that I do for stress. The thing that helps me the most is actually organization. And I think this is something that people don't take seriously enough. Because I run my own business, I have to be organized. I literally have my diary down here now, but I make to-do list after to-do list. I time block my days. I make sure nothing is left to chance. And I make sure anything that could be clogging up my brain is down on paper. And it helps me to visualize how my day's going to look, how my week, my month is going to look. That really helps me. And then the other thing, which I know we just touched on, that comes under this for me is actually meal prep. That helps my stress levels in a huge way. I know if I've done a Sunday meal prep session, my fridge is ready to go. It's just one last thing to think about for the week. We do a non-negotiable Sunday food shop. We actually get it delivered, so we have no excuse as to not do it, which we used to make all the time. I used to be like, oh, I'll just pop to Lidl. That never ended up doing it. And then wake up on Monday, and then every meal is left to chance throughout the week. You're like, oh, what do we fancy for this meal every day? Those bits of organization just help me in such a huge way with my stress. That alongside my steps. So I get outside for steps every day. I walk my dog, but we've only actually had him for a year, so I was still doing it before then. And preferably out in nature doing them. And I think that's a huge, huge thing. So those two things really are game changers for me.
For anyone who is just listening to the audio and not watching the video, I am like nodding my head profusely for the last 2 minutes. I feel like we get each other. Organization is so, so good for helping me feel on track. Just, it's the best. It's a game changer completely.
Just to add to that, I don't just do this for my work day. I will also add things into my diary. Things like when I'm going to be doing my meal prep, when I want to do a walk throughout the day, when my workouts are going to be. If I need to do something like call a parent, I'll sometimes add that in. And I can't tell you how much because everyone has a mental to-do list, whether we realize that we do or not. And that can be the thing that just gets completely jumbled in your head and can cause a lot of stress. So just having it down on paper is so beneficial. I won't go to sleep at night, which I guess I can come on to in a second, because sleep and stress are hugely linked. But I won't go to sleep at night without having everything written down for the next day. That means I get a good night's sleep, and then I'm less stressed off the back of that as well. So yeah,
100%. I feel like I'm listening to a recording of myself today.
I know we always have this.
Yeah, this is so funny.
aligned.
You know, when we were speaking yesterday, I told you I was really excited to have my Epsom salt bath with the magnesium. I put that in my diary. Otherwise, it wasn't going to happen. I just knew I would put it off. So that was in my diary. Actually, the other day on my hen, someone asked me, what do you think are 3 words that Zach would use to describe you? And I said, oh, I don't know, maybe beautiful, caring, and fun. Do you know what the first word he said was on the video to everyone? Organized. It's like, I wasn't expecting that, but it's true.
Yeah, so true.
So
true. I love that. Elliot said the other day that one of my biggest turn-offs is the fact that I like to get everywhere on time. That's interesting. It's better than being late, isn't it?
100%. I could not agree more. Okay, so yeah, sleep is huge for gut health as well. There's obviously this really big link. Do you have any tips on that front apart from writing down your to-do list for the next day, which I agree, it gets everything out of your mind and onto paper or a note. But what other tips would you give here?
So having a wind down routine, however that looks for you, and it doesn't need to be anything crazy that social media will like to say, really helps. So I just have some basic signals that I think I'm telling my body. You'll probably understand the science behind this a bit more. Yeah, basically tells my body that we're getting to the point of going to bed. So it might be I'm putting my phone to one side. I'm bad with screens, I have to say, but I try not to let it be my phone. And I'll try and like switch on to like watching some like silly YouTube channel or like something, I don't know. I'm watching Love Island at the moment, which I hate to admit. And something that completely switches me off from my work. And light a candle. I'll sometimes do a herbal tea. I have already had my dark chocolate because I have that after dinner, but I guess that's my first step in probably like my nighttime routine. But my skincare, because I always take at least 5 minutes with dim lights in my bathroom. We've got some lovely lighting in there. And if not, I'll just bring my candle in and get that on. And then we'll get into bed. And sometimes to get to sleep, and maybe you'll disagree with this as from a scientific perspective, but I will sometimes put on a sleep podcast where someone talks through like a really calming bedtime story. I listen to this amazing Scottish guy that just has this lovely soothing voice. And if there's anything that I'm focusing too much on throughout the day, that really helps me to get to sleep. I don't know if that's technically a good way.
I think it's whatever works for you. Some people like to fall asleep listening to something, and I can see how some people would argue against it, but if it works for you and it sends you into a deep sleep, I'm all for it.
Definitely. But I think it's a case really of having at least 3 things that you do as part of your routine that kind of tells your body, we're winding down. It's time for that.
Totally. I love that. I was going to ask you, what does a typical day of eating look like for you now compared to a few years ago? But I know you start your days with overnight oats, and I know you finish your days with your square of dark chocolate, just like me. So between those two, what does it typically look like?
Okay, so overnight oats, I will sometimes mix it up with eggs if it's the weekend or whatever. I love like a fried egg on sourdough sort of thing, and I'll spice it up with like avocado and kimchi, sauerkraut, like all those sorts of things, and maybe a little feta. So a really, really solid breakfast. I don't snack between my breakfast and lunch just because I don't need it. That was one of the biggest things I've noticed since changing my diet, is the need for snacks has just completely dwindled, which is lovely. I'm fueling myself really well at meal times. I get to lunch. My lunch is a really big bowl of food. I think a lot of people think salad and they think, like I was saying before, like lettuce and cucumber, which I love, but mine is packed full of carbohydrates, protein, healthy fats, and tons of different types of fiber, sprinkling of seeds. Like I really do mix it up, and I have something like that almost every day for lunch. If I need it, I will have an afternoon snack, and that is pretty carefully thought out. It would be something like, I know cottage cheese is controversial. It's a lot of people don't love it, but I do love a bit of cottage cheese. I love it with like rice cakes, or like on a slice of sourdough, or with a little bit of chili oil. I love it. Almost like a caprese salad vibe with like tomatoes, basil, olive oil, sea salt, that sort of thing. And roasted crispy chickpeas, a little mini Greek yogurt bowl. And we were talking yesterday, weren't we, about my Greek yogurt peanut butter dip, which I'll have with fruit, and something like a sliced apple and dip it in that. It's a really good on the go snack. Oh, nuts. I'm a huge like nuts and seeds person. So that'll be something that I have like really, really commonly. Sometimes like a throw a date in there if it's a pre-workout thing. And if I've got intense training, so I do a lot of squash, and you need a lot of energy for it. If I've got something like that, my pre-workout snack will often just be like 2 dates because I need the sugar. And then it'll get to dinner time. And then Dinner will also be something really balanced. Last night we had roasted salmon, some brown rice. I did this like cucumber salad with like soy sauce, rice, vinegar, and chili, or you mix it all together.
Yum.
With some kimchi. And it was really, actually really simple dinner, some sesame seeds, and it was delicious. And then my dark chocolate, which you know about. Non-negotiable 2 squares dark chocolate every single night.
What brand?
Well, I love the Hue one, which you love, and I know I keep meaning to try some of the different flavors. But there's a really good fair trade co-op one at the moment, which is an 80%, I believe, which actually tastes really good. Bit of an unexpected find, but it's really delicious.
Lovely. That sounds great. I love 80%. Yeah, Hue is my go-to. The Hue hazelnut butter or the cashew butter vanilla. Oh, so good.
So tasty. I love their sea salt one as well.
So nice. So nice. All of this is making me hungry for lunch.
I just want to add though, is we eat a lot of like pasta dishes and things like that as well, like noodle things. I think when people think healthy eating, they often think that you can't have things like that, and maybe only things like brown rice are okay. But the night before, we had a tomato pasta with lovely cheese and these really good quality sausages in. So we do also have lots of like comfort food dinners, especially at this time of year as well.
I completely agree. And I love that you added that in. It's so important to be realistic and just to know that food can be so enjoyable and nourishing and comforting and delicious and fun. So before we move into the quick fire round, I have one last question for you, which is, if a listener is struggling with constant bloating right now, what would be your one biggest piece of advice to them based on your own experience?
Ooh, great question. I would say look at your day of eating and first of all see where you can make slightly healthier swaps. So don't start by just eliminating things. I think a lot of people get swept up in this, like, let's try and pinpoint where this is coming from and then demonizing one thing. And actually, like I was saying, the first step I took with things like swapping out my bread for a better quality bread, same with like a bagel for a quality bagel. Why can I not think of other swaps than what I made off the top of my head? Things like if you are someone that drinks a lot of like sugar-free drinks, maybe swapping it for a kombucha if you need that slightly like fizzy cold thing. So making some swaps is probably the first thing that I would do.
That's a really good first step. I love that. Well, we finish each guest episode with a quick fire round. So are you ready?
Yes.
What is something that seems healthy but often backfires for your health?
Ooh, I'm going to say the wholemeal bread.
What's one habit you see clients struggle with the most?
The weekends. Feeling like I shouldn't be expanding on it, should I? But feeling like they need to eat in a totally different way at the weekend.
What is your favorite gut-friendly food?
Kimchi.
What's one nutrition myth or wellness trend you wish would disappear?
Things like beef tallow, stuff like beef tallow on the face, things like that.
What's one healthy habit you're still working on?
This is a tricky one. Work-life balance.
Aren't we all?
Yeah.
And we'll finish this round with a few fun ones. Coffee or matcha?
Coffee, but I love matcha as well.
Favorite coffee shop?
The one on my road. I don't want to give the name away because it's the name of my road, but it's amazing in Hampshire.
Amazing. If you could only do one type of exercise for the rest of your life, what would it be?
I'm going to have to say squash.
And lastly,
resistance training is what I should say.
Lastly, what is one word you associate with a healthy gut?
Balance.
Thank you so much, Annie. That's amazing. Thanks for being a guest on the Gut 360 podcast. If someone wants to learn more about what you do, what's the best place for them to go?
Probably my Instagram page, which is Annie Openshaw. But my website for my coaching, if you want to learn more about that, which is accomplishedcoaching.co.uk.
Amazing. I couldn't recommend it more. You'll find me in there as their in-house nutritionist.
Absolutely.
And thanks so much, Annie, for your time. And thank you guys for listening to today's episode. If you enjoyed this podcast, make sure you hit follow for your weekly episodes every Monday morning. If you're listening on Apple Podcasts, you just click the plus button, or on Spotify, it says the word follow. And if you can take 10 seconds to leave us a quick 5-star review wherever you're listening. I'd be so, so grateful. It honestly really helps me reach more people, helps us get amazing guests on the show like Annie. So please rate and review and share it with your friends, sister, mum, and have a beautiful rest of your week. And I'll be back in your ears next Monday.